Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to Rebecca Avern's session. Rebecca is one of the world's leading authorities on pediatric acupuncture. She teaches pediatrics both at undergraduate and postgraduate level, and also internationally. Her clinical work is solely with children, both in her private pediatric practice and at a low-cost community clinic for children. So she runs a multi-bed for children. She is the author of the textbook Acupuncture for Babies, Children and Teenagers, which is now used in colleges all over the world. She's also written a book for parents and practitioners called Chinese Medicine for Childhood Anxiety and Depression, And Rebecca is known for her clear and warm teaching, which is based upon her experience of working with hundreds of children and their families. Rebecca, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for coming. Can you hear me okay? I have a tendency to sort of gradually forget the microphone, so do shout or wave or something if you stop being able to hear me. So I wanted to talk about non-needle techniques that I use with children but have become increasingly aware can also be adapted to be used with adults and any sensitive patients. And it always amazes me how many adults, when I used to treat adults, would come for acupuncture and say, "Oh, I really don't like needles. You're not going to put any needles in me, are you?" And I sort of always thought, well, you have come for acupuncture. But when I've been teaching acupuncturists to treat children, and they've been practicing some of the techniques that we use on children on each other, they've invariably said, "Oh, why can't we use them on adults? You know, I feel really relaxed with this." And so it kind of made me aware, really, that we're missing a trick in not adapting some of the childhood techniques to be used on other patients as well. So I'm going to just start out by talking a bit about why and how non-needle techniques can be very powerful. And I'm going to talk a little bit about touch as a therapeutic technique. And I'm going to focus what I teach you on non-needle techniques to be used for anxiety. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about why so many of our patients are anxious, and very importantly, what impact that has on their chi. And then I'm going to talk you through a routine which can be used to ease anxiety on children and adults that doesn't involve any needles. So I will talk you through it before lunch, and then after lunch we will have the opportunity for you to actually practice it on each other. You can just do it fully clothed, lying on the floor, even sitting on chairs actually, so that you actually kind of remember it. And then tomorrow morning in your clinic, well, tomorrow's a bank holiday, Tuesday morning in your clinic, you can go away and start using it. So please do stop me at any point and ask questions if you have any. So I should start by saying that when I became an acupuncturist 21 years ago, I believed that it was needles or nothing. I really came from a sort of school of thinking that if I can't use needles, I'm not going to be able to achieve any effect. And then when I started to treat more and more children, I was forced, they say that necessity is the mother of invention, to kind of change my views and open my mind, because many children are not open to needles, or at least not open to as many needles as you would want to use on them. So if I've come to a place of believing in the power of what we can do without needles, then anyone can, as it were, because I was so far down the other end of the spectrum. So I think sometimes we think of acupuncture as purely being about needles. And we know that there are very strong Chinese needling methods, a bit less strong Japanese needling methods, and then Toyohari techniques, which are non-insertive, and of course things like moxibustion and even gua sha and cupping that don't use needles. And specifically for children, there are lots of surface stimulation techniques in the Shonishin tradition. And this wonderful system of treating children called pediatric tuina, which is very, very different to adult tuina, but incredibly effective and powerful. I often tell the story very early on in my pediatric practice. I was rung up by a mother who I spoke to for about half an hour, and she told me about the very long and complicated case history of her 5-year-old daughter, who had had very serious gastrointestinal disease since the day she was born. And she'd been in and out of hospital, she'd had biopsies, she'd had surgeries, and she said, could I help her? And I said, well, I don't know, but bring her along and I'll have a look. And then just before she put the phone down, she said, oh, one more thing. You won't be able to go anywhere near her with a needle because she's been traumatized by the Western interventions she's had. So I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And that's when I went and did an apprenticeship with a Chinese doctor in London and learned pediatric tuina. And lo and behold, this girl just got better and better and better, and I didn't go anywhere near her with a needle. I actually still treat her now. She's in her late teens, and she's very happy to have needles. But that really convinced me of the power of what we can do without needles. So what I am going to teach you at the end of the morning and this afternoon is essentially a combination of Shonishin techniques, pediatric tuina, and some channel massages as well. So how can we affect the inside of the body? How can we affect the Zhang Fu when we're just touching the skin and we're not penetrating the skin? Well, we need to remind ourselves that the 12 main channels which link to the Zhang Fu, of course, lie within the skin. And therefore, when we manipulate the skin, when we stimulate the skin in any way, we're influencing the qi and blood and the other vital substances of the Zhang Fu. And we can think of the different layers which are all connected. These are different energetic layers, and they're each governed by different types of channels. And so when we work on the most outer layer, the skin, the effect of what we do seeps through right to the deepest layer, to the blood vessels and the bones. And I think it's important that we remember that when we're just using touch, because we can actually forget the power, really, of what we do. So this is a slight aside, but important. Touch really has become somewhat taboo. And I think that this is definitely one of the many reasons that there was such a spike in anxiety and other mental health problems during the pandemic, when we weren't allowed to touch each other. But increasingly, and maybe more in America than in Europe, but to some degree here, children are really kind of socialized from a very early age to limit their touching. And particularly at schools, teachers aren't allowed to, give young children a comforting hug anymore. They're not allowed to put sun cream on children in the summer. And of course, we know that there have to be kind of safeguards in place, but I feel that perhaps things have gone a bit too far, and that we are really a sort of touch-deprived society. And I think many of our patients benefit not only from talking to us and from the acupuncture we give them, but also from the therapeutic touch that we can use as a part of our treatment. And yes, touch isn't a luxury. It really is a necessity. There have been studies done, or there were studies done in orphanages in Romania, where children, babies in the orphanage, were given milk. They had all the sort of physical things they needed to keep them alive, but they would die because they weren't touched. And there's actually been, this is kind of scientifically proven now, that we actually need touch to stay alive. So, we have approximately 18 square feet of skin. That's a lot of skin. It's the largest sense organ in our bodies. And our skin is always on. We can't just turn a switch and stop it from sensing, picking up, absorbing everything that's going on in our environment. And certainly at the beginning of life, but really to some degree throughout our life, it is one of the primary means of experiencing the world. So this really gives us the context of why intentional therapeutic touch can be so therapeutic. And there's a wonderful professor who looks like a sort of archetypal bumbling professor at Liverpool University, called Professor Francis McGlowan, who's devoted his entire career to studying the power of touch. And he says one of the biggest things about touch is it regulates our emotional states. So when we think about wanting to help manage anxiety, touch is a very good way of doing it. But of course, as acupuncturists, we're not just talking about any old touch. We're talking about touch that we use in a way to specifically try to direct and influence qi. So we have an added sort of aspect to the way that we can use touch, in that we know where the meridians are and where the points are and what different parts of the body correspond to, so we can use touch in a much more focused and specific way to help people feel better. So when we're using touch in our practices, I think it can be all too easy to let our intention sort of go elsewhere and wander. You know, when we have a needle in our hands, it can really focus our intention. But for touch to be really effective, and for us to influence a patient's chi in the way that we want to, we need to keep our intention very clear and focused. And as Sun Su Miao said, medicine is intention. Those who are proficient at using intention are good doctors. So we need to make sure that, and I find this working with children, that, you know, the parent might want to talk to me, or a sibling is trying to climb up my shelves and reach my sharps box, or, you know, there's something else going on. But it's really important to remain focused on what we're doing. And also, I think part of intention is belief in the power of what we're doing. If we begin to doubt it, we become less effective. And that's why after lunch I want you all to sort of practice this on each other, so that you actually get to experience it, and then you'll be able to use it with much sort of greater intention with your patients. So before we go on to look at what we're actually going to do, let's talk briefly about why so many of our patients are anxious. So I don't think it's purely the children that I see that are anxious. I would imagine, perhaps, that you experience your adult patients, many of them, even if that's not why they're coming for treatment, they are highly anxious. We live in the age of anxiety, really, don't we? And we could talk about the reasons for that for the rest of the day, but I've just put down what I think are some of the key reasons for the spike in anxiety. So I think anxiety in many respects is a very understandable reaction to the state of the world. It's not necessarily inappropriate. Sadly, we find ourselves living in a world where there are very, very real things to become anxious about. And I think that whilst there are these very big global issues that affect our lives and have the potential to affect our lives even more very negatively in the future, many of us feel very powerless to know what to do about that. And that feeling of powerlessness very much increases our anxiety. I think that being exposed to the media 24/7, having notifications coming up on our phones, on our devices, checking the news on the internet or on social media all the time, definitely increases our anxiety. And anxiety is to some degree catching. I think that during the pandemic, and to some degree before, and even more so now, there was anxiety in the ether. And children definitely act like sponges, and they soak that up and it becomes their own. But I think as adults we do that to some degree as well. So yes, children are anxious because adults are anxious. They take their lead from us. And children are increasingly spending their time doing kind of head-based, screen-based activities. And that can definitely encourage the rising up of qi, which we'll talk about more in a minute, and increase anxiety. They often feel enormous pressure in different areas of life from a very early age. There's a sense from parents who only want the best for their children that they need to kind of be pushing them in many spheres from a very young age. They tend to have very fast-paced lives. Activity and achievement are often prioritized over emotional health and relationships and connection, which increases anxiety. And then the big social media, which any of you who have children or teenagers will be only too aware of, but it undoubtedly doesn't help. So we're going to look at what this does to our qi, and then we will start looking at what we can do about it and these non-needle techniques. So when we become anxious, qi tends to get stuck in our heads. So if you've ever gone down a bit of a rabbit hole on the internet, or found yourself of an evening when you're tired just being on your devices for too long, you'll know that you quite often then feel a bit kind of agitated, it's harder to sleep, you're kind of overthinking, and your clarity of thought often diminishes. So anxiety tends to mean that too much qi gets stuck in our head, and also around our sense organs. So when we're exposed to a lot of sensory stimulation all the time, you know, noises, voices, lights, etc., then our sense organs become sort of hypervigilant. They're always on alert, and that means the qi gets stuck in their vicinity. Anxiety generally has a propensity for all the qi in our body to rise upwards and become counterflow, in contrast to sudden shock, which can make qi scatter and descend. But this sort of chronic low-level anxiety, in my experience of seeing what it does to patients, is that it tends to make qi kind of go up. And this is why people who are anxious tend to find it hard to sleep and to ever sort of go deep into a relaxed state. And living in a sort of overstimulated state also means that our qi tends to leave the zhang fu and go too much to the surface of the body. It's as if we're living in readiness for a threat to some degree all the time. So the qi becomes rather superficial. And inside, internally, particularly in children, but in adults to some degree too, the qi can become knotted, and the free flow of qi becomes impaired. So there's a degree of internal stagnation. So we often end up in the situation where there's a kind of excess of qi above and a deficiency of qi below. And next time you have an anxious patient, just feel the temperature of their head relative to the temperature of their feet, and I can almost guarantee their head will be a lot hotter than their feet. It's amazing how many anxious people have cold feet and a hot head, which is a very obvious sign of this counterflow qi, which kind of rises up and gets stuck in the head. So, considering all of that, what we need to do with our non-needle techniques is firstly to calm the Shen. And this, what I'm going to show you, can either be used on its own in treatment, but you can also use it as a precursor to any needling that you want to do with adults. So sometimes people come into the clinic having had a frantic day, having just, struggled to find a place to park, or had a row with their partner, or they're in a really anxious state. And to do something immediately that calms the Shen and helps the qi to descend can then mean that they're far more receptive to your needling. We need to move qi in the channels of the head, which, as I said, tend to get blocked and stuck. We need to help qi to go down. We need to encourage qi back to the internal organs. And we need to establish a free flow of qi in the channels, so we need to get rid of the stagnation. And finally, we need to strengthen the root. So we need to make sure that the root is strong enough to hold the qi and the yang in the body. And believe it or not, we can do all of this without needles. So are there any questions before I come on to show you what this entails? Pia?
Do you ever encounter children or adults, you don't see adults anymore, who have actually hot feet?
Yes, sometimes, but the vast majority of the time, and I don't know if it's just in children, because obviously I don't have the current experience with adults, but I would say literally 80% of the anxious children that I treat have cold feet, which I find kind of extraordinary. They have cold feet, but they're a bit hyperactive, they don't sleep, they don't appear to be deficient, because they're running on this deficient kind of yang that's stuck in their heads. So it definitely seems to be a very strong tendency. And I'd be interested to know if it was the same with adults. So, oh yeah, sorry, hello.
Do you have experience working with children with autism, especially those with sensory needs that may either appreciate any touch or they need that further touch? Have you found that it's been successful?
Yes. So I do treat lots of children who are on the autistic spectrum and have sensory processing issues. And very often the parent will say to me when they book them in, my child just is hypersensitive to touch, you won't be able to touch them. And it can be a challenge, but I do feel that if you can find the right method of touch and the right strength of touch with an autistic child, and once they've relaxed into the environment, you can 99 times out of 100 find a way of using touch in your treatment with them. And I sometimes start by just focusing on one part of the body where they're most able to accept touch. So the hand is a common one. I very often do techniques through clothes initially. And actually they really benefit from touch. So it's just a matter of kind of intuiting really the kind of touch and the strength and the depth of touch that they can tolerate. But it's definitely worth persisting with, because it can be so beneficial. And it's a bit of a kind of irony really, a cruel irony, that children on the spectrum really relax with the right kind of touch, but yet at the same time are so sensitive to touch that it's very hard to find a way in, as it were. But yes, it's definitely worth persisting with, yeah. So I'm going to show you this routine, which is a mix of some pediatric tuinamus, some Shonishin techniques, some channel massages and acupressure, and also involves the use of seeds or magnets. And I would like to credit my pediatric tuina teacher, Dr. Hong Chun Yin, Stephen Birch, who I originally learned Shonishin from, Shimamura, who I then learned some more Shonishin from, and all the children and teenagers who come to my 2 pediatric clinics, who have essentially been kind of guinea pigs, really. And I'm endlessly grateful for the most difficult children to treat, because they make me be more creative in my approach. And they're typically anxious sort of 14 or 15-year-olds. These are the really tricky ones, who will not want any degree of touch, definitely won't take any clothes off, are highly suspicious of you altogether, and are kind of looking at you as if to go, oh, my mum's dragged me here and I really don't want to be here. And I see it as a challenge to really win them round. And they are the ones that have taught me how little you need to do to really make a difference, when I've literally just potentially been able to take a sock off and touch an ankle tentatively or something like that. And it's all about a process. You can just start off a little bit and then at the next treatment do a little bit more, and gradually they end up actually really being kind of advocates for acupuncture.
Are you still calling it acupuncture?
Well, that's a good question. I mull over this often, because if I call it something other than that, I feel like I'm being a bit sly. I've thought about calling it acutherapy, but in terms of how I sort of, advertise my clinic, I normally say acupuncture and non-needle techniques. And I make it very clear to the children and teenagers when they first come that there's no pressure to have needles. And actually, I use needles at some point with about 80% of my patients, but that may not be for 6 sessions or however long that I get to that point. It's all about the rapport. Once you have the trust and the rapport with the child or the teenager, then they will let you do what you need to do. Going back to your question, I remember many years ago, a girl, very high functioning autistic girl of about 13 coming to my clinic, and she was literally, her body was completely tight and hunched over, and she wouldn't look at me, and she was kind of going like this. And she was, staying right next to her mum, and I just thought, gosh, what am I going to do? And she did, unlike some other patients, she was happy to lie on the couch but not take anything off. And I just did a little bit of Shonishin, which I'm going to show you today, and she started laughing. And she just laughed and laughed and laughed. I just did it through her clothes. And there's a Swedish study that shows that Shonishin techniques release oxytocin in the body, which is the happy hormone. And she now is really, years later, is happy to be needled, loves her treatment. So you just have to kind of go baby step by baby step. So, step 1. So I'm going to talk you through, and then I will show you after we've talked through everything, because I know until you see it, it's hard to really sort of imagine it. So the first thing we need to do is calm the Shen. And the way that we're going to do this is by using 3... Shall I move over here? I'm blocking your view. 3 pediatric Tuinar techniques on the heads. So I will show you pictures of them. We do each of these 3 moves. On a child, I would do it for about a minute each, but on an adult, you might do it for 2 or 3 minutes, depending on their capacity to stay still. So the first one is simply straight pushing from yin tang up to around do 24. So you only stroke upwards, and you don't need to use force, but you need to have firm contact. And you need to do this stroking movement with a consistent rhythm. It becomes rather hypnotic. But of course, we're going through points here which have a very, very strong impact on the Shen. Yes? Just with your hands. And you can either do it with a thumb, with the pad or the side of a pad of a thumb, or you can do it with one thumb and then the next. When I'm doing it on a young child, I sit facing them, but if you're doing it on an adult or an older child, you can stand behind them when they're lying on the couch and do it from the back of their heads. Okay, so that's the first move. And then the second one follows on from the first. So same kind of movement, straight pushing from around do 24 where you stopped to approximately do 22. But you don't need to be measuring the head and finding the point. It can be very approximate, but you go essentially about the height of the forehead back again. Okay. as well as being very calming, I use these moves a lot on teenagers because of their effect on working on the prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is the part of the brain that increases the ability for self-insight. Teenagers need that. So one of the sort of nice side effects of treatment is that parents often say they feel their teenagers matured quite a lot since they've had treatment. And this just helps them to have a little bit more self-awareness, a bit more awareness of their impact on others, as well as being very calming. So we've got Heaven Gate and Heart Gate. And then the third move is Water Palace. So this involves pushing apart from the middle to approximately the outer edge of the eyebrows. So I'm going to have to put the microphone down to show you. Rolling microphone. So above the eyebrows, somewhere in the middle of the forehead, either with a finger or two fingers or your thumbs, just push apart like this, okay, repeatedly. You can either use the bulk of your thumb and cover the whole forehead, or you can just do one movement which is roughly in the middle of the forehead, or you can do several. So you can start just above the eyebrows, which is often an area where people carry a lot of tension, and then you can gradually move upwards over the forehead. So with all of these moves, adapt them to what feels right for the patient that you have in front of you. This is a kind of template, and you can play with it. So these 3 head moves are a really good start. They really, really calm the Shen and help people to relax and sort of sink into the couch. As an aside, if you know anyone with small children who aren't sleeping, when a child wakes up at night or when they can't go to sleep at bedtime, if you just do these 3 moves, invariably it will send a child to sleep, a young child. It really, really works well. Yes, absolutely. As they get older, yes, definitely. And it's what a great sort of tool to give a child to be able to kind of calm and self-soothe in that way. Yeah. And as adults, we could do them on ourselves. I don't think it's quite the same as it being done to us, but it definitely still a good thing. Okay, so those are the first 3. And then we need to get the chi in the head moving. So we said earlier that when we're anxious, the chi rises up to the head and gets stuck. So the propensity for chi to get stuck in our head is increased depending on the nature of our birth. So children who have a forceps delivery, or where there was a very long second stage of labour where there was a lot of kind of pushing, tend to have more chi stagnation in the head. And you can often see it. You can see blue veins on the head, particularly in babies that are born with no hair, or on the temples. It often manifests, as well as being anxious, as difficulty sleeping, perhaps attention deficit problems. But even for someone who's had a really easy birth and who wasn't kind of born with this propensity, being very anxious, overthinking will still create this to some degree. So this is very simple. We need to massage the channels on the head from the anterior hairline to the apex of the head. So you can do this with someone lying down. And I would start on the do channel, and with your thumb, just use small circular movements along the do channel. And then either side along the bladder channel. And you're doing this quite firmly, I'll show you later. And then roughly along the gallbladder channel. But when you come across points or areas on the scalp that feel hard and knotted and tight, you can work on those areas more. And you can then follow that up by massaging gallbladder 20 at the back of the neck. So again, you can still do that with the person lying down. And this really begins to free up all of that stuck chi. And it's a very soporific massage. Patients often begin to fall asleep or at least kind of doze when you're doing it. So we've calmed the Shen, we've begun to get the chi moving in the head. And now we need to move the chi around the sense organs. So our ears, when we're constantly surrounded by noise, again, chi goes to the ear. The kidneys become deficient because there's a kind of maldistribution of chi. Too much of it is kind of around the ear and it gets stuck. And this is one of the reasons in autistic children that they have very sensitive hearing. It's because the chi in the triple burner and the gallbladder channels around the ear is stuck. And you find that when you start moving it, their hearing sensitivity diminishes. And our eyes as well suffer. And the eyes are not only related to the liver, but also to the heart. We look for the state of the Shen via the eyes, don't we? The Shen of the heart. So when you start working around the eyes, you find that there's often a lot of emotional release. And that's something to be wary of. Not wary of, just to be aware of. It's a good thing. Better for the emotion to be released than to be stuck in. So, the next step in our routine is to massage around the ears. Again, with small circular movements. Starting from around small intestine 19, going over the top of the ear, through all the triple burner points, and down to triple burner 17, and massaging there for a bit on both ears. You can go round once, you can go round a few times, whatever feels right, depending on who you're working on. And then we need to release the stuck chi around the eyes, which we do by massaging, again, in small circular movements from bladder 1 over the eyebrow and back, around through stomach one, back to the inner canthus. And when you do it on yourself or on each other after lunch, you will, I think we don't realize quite how much tension we carry around our ears and our eyes until we start working on it. Okay. So we've got the 3 calming Shen moves: Heaven Gate, Heart Gate, Water Palace. We've got the head channel massages. We're going to go around the ears, around the eyes. So we're kind of freeing up all this stuck chi in the head. But then we need to get it out of the head so it doesn't just re-stick. So we need to find a way of descending chi from the head. So a really effective way at doing this is to use a massage that goes down the SCM, down the sternocleidomastoid mastoid muscle of the neck, from just underneath the jawbone to the top of the clavicle. So with the palms of your 3 fingers, if you're working on an adult, on a child you might use 1 or 2 fingers, you repeatedly stroke down this muscle, which you're stroking over the stomach channel, the small intestine channel, the large intestine channel. It's much easier to manipulate the chi in the yang channels. So you're encouraging the chi to come down out of the head into the body. As a sort of added bonus, lymphatic drainage practitioners also use this massage. It helps to drain the lymph, and it also is a way of regulating the vagal nerve, which can be accessed in this area. And that, I think, from a sort of more Western perspective, is another reason that this is so relaxing. You don't, again, need to use big pressure. It's quite a sensitive, vulnerable area. So just sort of go in slowly and check in with your patient what pressure feels right for them. And I would generally do that for about a minute on each side of the neck. And it's much easier if you get your patient to turn their head one way, do it on one side, turn their head the other way, do it on the other side. Okay. And we also said that when we're anxious, the chi tends to get stuck at the surface of the body. So we also need to do something to encourage the free flow of chi. Particularly in children, there's often an imbalance in the relationship between the yin chi in the center and the wei chi on the surface. And the yin chi is not very effective at drawing the wei chi back in. So everything kind of gets stuck on the surface of the body. So this is where we're going to use some Shonishin techniques. So this is the only part of the routine where you might want to use some kind of tool. You don't have to, you can just use your hands. But if you want to, you can use something like this. This is a Shonishin tool called a choki-san. And we hold it, I'll show you when I do the demo, and just lightly stroke it over the body. You can use a shell, you can use the back of a spoon, you could use a gua sha tool, or if you don't have anything to hand, just use your hand. And so this method to disperse the qi at the surface of the body involves stroking down the yang surfaces. So we're not thinking about channel direction here. We're just thinking about working on the yang surfaces and helping to free up the qi, and also this will continue to encourage the downward movement of qi that you've just released in the head. So we stroke down the arms from the top to the bottom, just a few times. You can do it through clothes, you can do it on the skin. If you're doing it directly on the skin, it's wise to follow with your non-dominant hand and see if you can pick up a change in the skin as you do it. So you might feel the skin get slightly warmer. It might get slightly moist or slightly springier. And the more you do it, the more you will tune in to the subtle changes on the skin. And as soon as you feel a change, then you can move on to the next part of the body. But if you're doing it through clothes, obviously you're not able to pick up on those immediate changes. So come down the arms, both arms. On a child or on a man, you could come down the stomach channel on the torso. On a woman, you might start just below the breast and just stroke downwards either side around the stomach channel. And we're not too focused on the exact pathway of the channel here. We're talking more about areas, so don't sort of worry about whether you're exactly in the right place or not. And then you stroke down the yang surface of the legs. So you'll be covering most of the stomach and the gallbladder channel, and you stroke down one leg. You can either do the whole leg, or you can do half and then half, depending on the size of your patient, and then do the same on the other side. Yes. So good question. No, it tends to be not very rapid, and I'll give you a demo. But what you find is there are some patients where it feels better to do it a bit faster, and some patients where, particularly the ones who are really sort of hyper and agitated, where it feels better to do it more slowly. Again, if you're working on a very restless baby, you have to do it quickly. But if you're working on an adult, then you won't need to do it so quickly. So there's no real right or wrong. I would just feel your way into it. You can also do this stroking down the back, but I'm just showing you here a routine that doesn't involve your patient having to move at all, so they can completely relax. But that's a little sort of add-on you can do if that feels appropriate. So we've calmed the Shen, we've freed up the stuck qi in the head, around the sense organs. We've helped the qi to come down out of the head. We've moved the qi at the surface of the body to get everything flowing. And then really importantly, we need to keep the qi rooted. Otherwise, it's just going to float back up. So this involves doing something on kidney 1. which in my experience is the most effective point at helping to root qi and yang down. So you could simply massage kidney 1. My favorite thing is to use indirect moxa on kidney 1, especially with all of these children with cold feet that I mentioned earlier. So using moxa on this point right at the base of the body helps to attract the rising yang down. After doing either of those things, you can send your patient away with a magnet on kidney 1 or some kind of seed or sticker. So I very often with children I use a little mustard seed. I get a tiny mustard seed with a bit of micropore tape and stick it on kidney 1 because the warm energy of the mustard seed again helps to attract the heat down. That's another very good tip for parents of kids who aren't sleeping. If you tape a little mustard seed on kidney 1 at bedtime, they will be much more likely to sleep through the night because it's keeping the yang down. Or you can use, these are just little gold pellets. You know, you can use any kind of seed or magnet that you have in your clinic and that you like using. So that is the routine. So would someone be kind enough to be a body? It would just mean lying on a rather uncomfortable floor, and then I can actually show you. Oh, thank you very much. So if all of you want to come to where you can see. Okay, are you comfortable? Or as comfortable as you can be, lying on the floor. All right, so the first move was Heaven Gate to calm the Shen. So this involves stroking from yin tang to the hairline. So I find it easier to use both thumbs. And I'm not using much pressure. Does this pressure feel all right? I'm going at a fairly sedate pace. If I was working on a young child who's more yang in nature, I might speed up. Oh, thank you very much. So I would do this for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever feels right. Okay. And then I'm going to move to the second move, Heart Gate. So this goes from the front hairline back along the scalp, staying in the midline. Make sure that you cover Do 24. Don't start back here and miss out on Do 24. And again, you want a nice rhythm and a speed that suits the person that you're doing it on. Does this feel all right? Okay. And then we're going to do the third Shen calming move, which is Water Palace. So I'll show you the different ways that you can do this. So just rest your hands on the side of the head. It feels much nicer for the patient if you're supporting their head rather than if you're just doing the move. That feels a bit kind of disconnected, really. So I'm finding roughly the midpoint between the eyebrows and the hairline, remembering on a child that your hands are so big relative to the size of them that you're going to cover the area you need to anyway. And then you stroke outwards, pushing apart to roughly the end of the eyebrows, like this. Alternatively, you can use all of your thumb so that you're covering the whole forehead. And again, with people who are anxious, it's amazing how much tension they hold in their foreheads. Like this. Alternatively, you can work your way up the forehead, starting at the eyebrows and moving upwards. Okay. Any questions about those three? Okay. Do you need to take my
Feels
shoes
very
off?
calming.
Sorry. Good. It is calming doing it as well, actually. Okay, so now we've brought about an initial calmness, and now we need to start really moving some of this stuck chi. So,
Do you want me or shall I?
I don't mind, Peter. If everyone can hear,
It's actually for the
recording.
Yeah, but let's leave it.
Okay. So I'm going to start on the do channel around do 24, and with small circular movements. I normally go clockwise, but I don't think it really matters. I'm going along the do channel quite firmly, and when I feel an area that feels particularly tight or knotted, I'm going to stay there and potentially really kind of disperse the chi more strongly at that point.
Do you avoid if you have a spot somewhere?
Sorry?
Do you avoid if a spot somewhere?
Yes, I would do that. And when you're working on young babies, you have to be, obviously you need to avoid any fontanelle that haven't closed. And then I carry along to the back of the head to around do 20, and you can give do 20 an extra run to disperse the chi there. And then I would come back to the front of the head and go either side of the do channel, following approximately the line of the bladder channel, backwards. Again, I'm feeling that the right is more knotted than the left, so I'm just stopping to work a bit on that point there, and then carrying on backwards.
I can feel that releasing my head.
Anyone else?
I can feel it.
And then one more go back, starting around the line of the gallbladder channel. And the right side of your head is definitely and if you are doing this on children, you can definitely teach the parent to do it at home. So you've gone over those three channels, and then I would just massage gallbladder 20 for a minute or two. Obviously a place where we often store a lot of tension. I would probably do them all for a bit longer than this, but just for the purposes of showing you. Okay, so then we need to release the chi around the ears and eyes. Would that be all right? Thank you very much. Could I turn your head slightly to the left? Thank you. So, I'm going to start at small intestine 19 and come up the front of the ear, over the top, following the triple burner, the Sanjiao channel, around the back of the ear. Again, I'm just going in small circles. If I lift up Harry's ear, you'll be able to see a bit more. And then I'm going to fall into triple burner 17. You'll all be able to doze on each other after lunch. In time will come.
The communication with, say, the parents going to be there, do you find it's more important to be talking to the patient and the parent wants to keep everything quiet and you sort of pre-warn the parent to...
So, I don't pre-warn them, but I really energetically move my entire focus to the child. If the parent starts trying to chat, I might say, I'm really happy to talk to you when I finish this, but I just want to focus on this, or I wouldn't stop the child from talking, because that, for a young child, it restrains their yang. If they need to talk, let them talk. But yes, sometimes it is the parents that need managing. So you might go around a few times, both sides. Can I bring you back to the center? Thank you. And then we need to release the tension around the eye. So you might use a finger for this, or you might use a thumb, whatever feels better. I'm going to start in level 1, the eyebrow, across Yu Yao, and just following the bone. Just go very gently when you're going under the eye. I'm just sort of at the top of the bone. Back to that one. There's lots more you can do on the face. For example, massaging along the jawline, another area where a lot of people store their tension. So, or you can also massage from large intestine 20 through stomach 3 across to the ear. So, you can play with it and adapt it. So, we freed up the chi, and now we need to help it descend. Kerry, can I ask you to turn your head to the left again? So then we're going to, with the palm of your fingers, stroke from the bottom of the jaw, the bottom of the ear, downwards over the spermacoid and mastoid muscle to the top of the clavicle. So you're moving, you're encouraging the chi down via the yang channels in the neck. And you're also at the same time draining the lymph and helping to regulate the vagus nerve. I will do that for a couple of minutes. Thank you very much. And then the same on the other side. Okay. So then I need to get my. So I now want to keep the chi moving down and disperse the chi at the surface of the body. So I'm going to stroke down the yang surfaces of the arms and the legs. This is a bit hard to do when you're on your knees. So it won't be quite as fluid. So I'm going to hold this tool flat against my fingers. As I said, you don't have to use a tool, or you can use a shell or a gua sha ban or whatever you have. It's a very, very light movement. And my intention is to move and descend the chi. And I'm following with my non-dominant hands. I'm beginning to feel the skin warm up, so I'm moving on to the lower arm. If you want to, you can then just carry on to going down each finger and just squeezing the fingernail. And then
It's only for outside of the arm.
yes, exactly. Only the yang meridian, only the outside, because that's a more effective method of moving the chi and bringing it down than working on the yin meridians. Then I would do the other arm, and then the same on the leg. So again, it's a really light movement. Same on the other leg. And finally,
You didn't do the chest
no, I probably would on a child's, or it's not essential, but you can do, yeah. And then finally, strengthening the roots. So my preferred method, as long as there weren't any heat signs around the feet, would be to use indirect moxa on kidney 1. But for the purposes of today, I'm going to just massage kidney 1 strongly with the intention of holding the chi down for a minute, 2 minutes, whatever feels right. And then I would finish by putting a sticker on the point and sending the person home.
So I had a child in recently, and she wasn't letting me anywhere near her in that session. And actually, I know her parents pretty well, and they're paediatric osteos, so I sent them home with directions to do this.
Okay, great.
But it's because I knew them. I didn't
Yes.
realise that I probably feel quite uncomfortable about managing that with a parent who brought their child in for a treatment. How might you?
My experience is parents actually really love being given something to do because they feel often a bit sort of helpless in the face of their child being ill. So I really wouldn't worry about that. I think parents love it.
Right.
They actually feel like they can be helpful. It can help the relationship between the parents and the child to have that sort of special time. So I think there are times when, even if it's a child who's normally happy to be treated, they may turn up one day, they've woken up badly from a nap, you know, they're in a foul mood, whatever, and the best thing you can do is actually give something for the parent to do. And the parents just grateful that you're not kind of pinning their child down and, you know, forcing something on them that they don't feel happy with.
Well, this child's actually really sensitive to noise, and I have a sink in my clinic that's portable, and it's really noisy, and it really freaked her out, and that was just, I'd lost her then. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that before.
No. Well, you'll know next time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the ear massages, if the parents could do those every day
Yeah.
for a child who's got hypersensitive hearing, it really makes a difference. And they won't like it when you start off because it feels painful around their ears.
Right.
But if you just start with one time around, you know, and then maybe when they're distracted, and then gradually build it up. And the more you do it, the less painful it is for the child. As you move the chi and the stagnation clears, it's not painful anymore. And then their hearing really becomes a lot more kind of, you know, manageable for them.
So would you do the whole sequence? How often would you do that as a treatment? Would you do like once a week?
So it really depends. So I would tend to do it on any child or teenager who's anxious where I can't use needles for whatever reason. So I would probably start off with it. I would, yes, probably get them coming weekly. I'd give them lifestyle advice, maybe give something for the parent to do at home as well. And then my expectation would be that as they start to feel more relaxed, I can then do more in treatments to come. And that's really what happens. It kind of opens them up. And generally, I would never pressure a child to have needles, but what even the most resistant child, when you've done something like this or whatever else you're doing for a few weeks, will just come in out of the blue and say, oh, I'll have needles today. And because it's come from them, as soon as they feel like you're pushing them into it, then they go, I don't want that. But if you just say, it's fine, we don't have to. If you ever feel like you change your mind, let me know. Then they come to it in their own time. But this is a great thing to be able to do in the meantime. And then you could turn them over and do the stroking down the bladder channel, on the back, on the legs as well. A lot of kids have a lot of chi stagnation in the neck, in the nape of the neck, on the shoulders, and using something like this to disperse it and send it down is very, very helpful.
Where we can find it too?
So anywhere that sells Japanese acupuncture tools. So I know a lot of places have sold out at the moment. It's just stainless steel. Yeah, but if you Google Shonishin tools, you will come up with.
Harmony had the book, mine has the talk.
Okay.
Not quite sure.
Harmony,
The Harmony
yeah.
sells the book,
Yes.
yeah, but not quite really they sell the tool as well.
Yeah, Dulwich Acupuncture, they sell them, I think. Yeah. But as I say, you can just find some nice shells. Particularly children, I let them choose a shell. They like that. Use a gua sha band, use the back of a teaspoon. It really doesn't matter.
It would be lovely if a bunch of people could be around all the schools in the country. My little one just started primary school, there's so many of them just weeks on the way in.
It'd be a lovely way of starting the school day, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And get them to do it themselves, you know, to do it on their friends. And
Yes.
just let them know.
It would be lovely.
Would for parents to do this would help kids that are quite hyperactive and ADHD?
Definitely.
Right?
Definitely.
Yeah, that they've enjoyed them with this.
Absolutely. And I would often say to parents, they know the time of the day when things get most difficult. It may be when the child comes back from school or in the evening when they begin to get tired. So put it into the family routine that you do this treatment just before the time of day when things start to get difficult for the child. Yeah.
Do you have it written out somewhere?
So, this is sort of as close as it gets to having it written out.
So do you teach the parents and you don't give them?
Oh, I see, for the parents,
Yes.
yes. Yes, I do actually have it written out for the parents. I have diagrams, yes. So, yes, I also get them to video it on their phone.
Right.
I agree. Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Do stay there if you. Yes, getting them to video it is the best way. So you do it on the child, the parent videos it. If the child doesn't want you to do it on them, for whatever reason, do it on the parent. If there's another parent there, they can video it. But if you're doing it on the parent, they're more likely to remember it, and then you can write it down and give them the sheet. And yeah.
And the mustard mustard seed.
Yes.
Where do you get those?
Sainsbury's. I literally have a pot of Sainsbury's mustard seeds, and you can get the tape from Boots.
Yeah.
When I say I was concerned about magnets, small people who love to eat everything.
Yes.
They're tiny. the
They're
mustards.
really
It's
tiny. They're really tiny, and it's magic though.
One mustard seed.
One mustard seed. In a really persistent case, you can put one on kidney 1 on each foot, and one on the point which is sometimes called extra kidney 1, which is right in the middle of the heel. It's I think it's called shitsumin, and that's another point which helps to draw down chi. And actually the translation of the name, I think, is something like well, it's I think the translation of shitsumin is something like bring sleep, or is that?
Something like sleeping point.
Yeah, yeah, it was right in the middle of the heel. So you could put another mustard seed on that as well. But normally just the normal kidney 1 is enough. But if that doesn't work, then that's a sort of second thing to go to. So if you would like to come back after lunch, you can do it on each other, and I'll come and give you feedback. And I would recommend doing it, because if you don't do it now, you'll think you'll remember it and you won't do it. So,
Rebecca, sorry
Yes.
to wrong one. I know we're finishing, but if you've got children with anger,
yes.
and obviously yes, it's all with, calming the shen, but actually it's not letting them allowed to be maybe how they want to express it. How would you encourage that in clinic or outside, or are you just trying to calm them?
So I think I would keep my focus on correcting any imbalances of chi. So if there's an imbalance in the liver or whatever other organ, I would address that. If it
So
is
that's more with the needles you're going to be, or
with the
other
needles,
techniques.
or with this, or just putting a little seed on liver 3. Children need minimal amounts of treatment.
Yeah.
It's quite miraculous how quickly they respond to very, very, very small amounts of intervention. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello everyone again. I hope you had a nice lunch. Is there anyone here that wasn't here this morning? Okay, so that's okay. That's fine, we can accommodate that. So We talked this morning about the rationale behind this routine, which I then demonstrated, which, just to do a very quick recap, is to try to mitigate the effect that anxiety tends to have on our qi. So we are going to put together moves that calm the shen, move qi in the head where it tends to sit when we're anxious, release stagnation around the sense organs, which also tend to be kind of on overdrive and an area where qi tends to stagnate when we're anxious, and then to descend the qi that we've freed up in the head, to start bringing it down the body, and disperse the qi on the surface of the body, and then finally to strengthen the root to hold the qi and the yang down. This routine is a mix of some pediatric tuina, some shonishin, some channel massages, and I use this on children, teenagers that don't want needles, that are anxious. And you can either do this and then move on to needles, or just do this. And I was saying this morning, when I've been teaching it to people learning pediatrics and they've been practicing on each other as adults, they all said, oh, this is so relaxing. So it made me think, actually, it can be for anyone. Okay. So I'm going to start off, Tim, by doing some massage on your head. So the first 3 moves are all to calm the shen. Yeah, some of you will be familiar with these. So the first one, you straight push from yin tang to the anterior hairline. And you would do that for anywhere between about 1 and 3 minutes. If it's a child, a restless child, you might do 1 minute. If it's an adult, you might do 3 minutes. And you don't need to use great force. You just need to keep firm contact and use a consistent rhythm. Okay? This is called Heaven Gate. So that's the first move. They're all described in the PowerPoint as well, so you'll be able to read the description. So the second move is called Heart Gate, and this is essentially a continuation of what you've just done. So you straight push from do 24, staying in the midline, to around the area of do 22. But you're going to go back about the distance of the forehead. And you can either do it just with the one thumb like this, or you can alternate your thumbs. Okay. So obviously this area calms the shen. It goes through points that calm the shen. And it's a good way to help someone sink into the treatment at the start. The third move starts in the middle of the forehead, and you push apart like this. Does this feel okay, Tim?
Mm-hmm. Definitely calming.
Good. So with this one, there are different ways of doing it. So the traditional pediatric tuina way is just to cover one part of the forehead like this. But I think it accentuates the benefit, actually, if you cover the whole of the forehead. Or you can start just above the eyebrows and work your way up the forehead to the hairline. So those are the first 3 moves which calm the Shen, which you can do for somewhere between 1 to 3 minutes each, depending on your patient. So the next thing we want to do is to get the qi, the stuck qi, moving in the channels of the head. So to do this, if you start on the anterior hairline around Do24, and with little clockwise circles, just trace back along the Do channel. If you come to a part of the head that feels particularly hard or knotted, then you can work it and disperse the qi, and then just carry on back along the Do channel until you get to approximately Do20. And this is quite firm because you're working on the scalp and you're really trying to kind of disperse the stagnation. So you're using a firmer pressure. And then you want to move out to the bladder line, just either side of the Do, and do the same thing. So small circles tracing the channel over the head, stopping and rubbing more to disperse the qi if you feel a particularly tight, knotted, hard area. Okay, and again to around the apex of the head. And then we're going to move out further and do the same thing along approximately the gallbladder channel. So small circular movements. Until you reach about as far as you can get with your patient lying down. Okay, so you're encouraging the qi to move in the head, and then to finish that bit off, just find gallbladder 20 and firmly massage gallbladder 20, which will help to start descending the qi that you've just freed up. Okay.
That's the finish of step 2.
So yes, that's step 2, moving qi in the head. Exactly, yes. Okay. So the next thing we need to do is disperse the qi that tends to accumulate around the ears and the eyes when we're kind of overstimulated and thinking and sensorially stimulated all the time. So, Tim, can I ask you to move your head slightly to the left? Thank you. So we're going to work on the ears first. So starting from small intestine 19, come up just in front of the ear, again using small circular movements, and work your way around the ear following the triple burner channel until you fall off the bone into triple burner 17 at the base of the ear. And then you might do that a few times. And we were saying this morning, this is very useful for children who have hypersensitive hearing, and it disperses the qi in the channels around the ear and makes their hearing easier. So you might go around the ear once, twice, 3 times, and then the same on the other side. If I could move your head back to the center, thank you. And then we want to do the same with the eyes, which are not only related to the liver, but also to the heart. And when you work around the eyes, there's often quite a strong emotional release. So start at bladder 1 and massage again in small circular movements through bladder 2, Yu Yao, all the way along the bone, and through gallbladder 1, and then you have to go very gently. I'm going to switch to my thumb when you're going underneath the eye, so through stomach 1, but it's a very delicate area, so you might just lessen the pressure there. And then back to bladder 1, and you can do that a few times, both eyes. So we've calmed the Shen, we've started to release the stagnation in the head and the sense organs. We now need to try and descend the qi, get it out of the head. So Tim, if you could turn your head again to the left, thank you very much. So the next move is to massage down the SCM muscle from the bottom of the jawline, just under the ear, to the top of the scapula, with the flats, the palmar surface of your 3 middle fingers, or if you're working on a child, you might use 1 or 2 fingers. So you're going over the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine channels, and it's a more effective way of descending qi or activating the qi to work on the yang channels. You're also regulating the vagus nerve, which runs in this area, which has a very calming effect. And as a kind of beneficial side effect, this also drains the lymph nodes, so it helps the immune system. Okay, so this is to descend the qi, and again you might do this for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever feels right with that patient. Thank you, Tim. And then you would do the same on the other side. Okay, and then this is easier when you're working with someone on a couch. So for the next bit, you might want to use, this is a Shonishin tool. You can use the back of a spoon, you can use a shell, you can use a gua sha ban. You don't have to use a tool at all. So just do, oh, look at that, cheer. Thank you. Thank you. Well, we can use both of them when you're practicing. Oh, amazing, thank you. So if you're using a spoon, I would just use the back surface of the spoon. So we're going to very gently stroke down the yang surfaces of the body. We're not thinking about channel direction, we're just imagining that we're helping the qi to disperse and descend on the outer surfaces of the body. You can do this through clothes. If it's not a problem for the person to undress, you can do it on the skin, in which case you can follow with your non-dominant hand and pick up changes in the skin. But when I'm working with teenagers, the last thing they want to do is take their clothes off. So it works to do it through the skin. So I'm holding whatever tool I'm using flat in my hand and very gently stroking down the outer arm. And my intention is that I'm helping the chi to descend. And then I would do the same on the other arm. And then you can also do it down roughly the stomach channel on the chest. Okay. And then down the yang surface of the leg. So you're bringing the chi down. You've released the chi in the head and you're encouraging it out of the head. And then the same on the other side. And then to finish off, you need to root the chi so it doesn't just float back up. So you can do that by doing any number of techniques on kidney 1. You could use indirect moxa. You could just massage kidney 1. If the feet are cold, moxa works brilliantly, and using heat on this lowest point of the body encourages the yang down. And then before you send your patient home, I would put some kind of sticker on kidney 1. So I was saying this morning, with children I often use mustard seeds because they're slightly warming, so they attract the heat downwards. You can use any number. I saw, Tim, you've got one of those stickers on your hand. You could use one of those. You could use an ear seed. You could use a gold or silver plated disc. There are so many different kinds of seeds and stickers that you can get.
Would a Pionex needle be too much?
I think intuitively it feels better not to have anything that is going to penetrate even to the minute kind of degree that Pionex would. So as I said this morning, you can adapt this for the patient. If they're happy to turn over, you can do the stroking down the back as well, down the bladder channel, on the back and on the back of the legs. You can follow it up with needling. You can use it just on its own. If you're working with children, you can teach parents to do it at home. But even if you're just doing this, and even if you're just seeing your patient weekly, it really, really helps to gradually lessen their kind of chronic level of anxiety. I'm just going to make a few points while you're doing it. I don't want to disturb you and get you out of the zone, so I'll just talk quietly. So some of you have said, oh, should you do this bit in circles or stroking, or there's no definitive right or wrong. I think the key thing is to bear in mind your intention for each part of the routine. Are you trying to calm the Shen? Are you trying to dissipate stuck chi? Are you trying to descend chi? And then use whatever technique feels most appropriate for what you're trying to do. And when you're doing the stroking down the yang surfaces, that's really light. Just imagine you're just coaxing the chi down. You really don't need any pressure with that bit. And I think I mentioned this morning, but when you're working around the eyes and the ears, you can also massage the jaw, because that's another place where qi tends to stagnate. So just sort of pinch the skin above and below the jawline and then kind of massage around. Yeah, it's okay, don't worry. This is just a kind of added extra if you want to. Particularly with people that grind their teeth and that have jaw pain. And another addition to kidney 1, we mentioned this morning the extra kidney 1 in the middle of the heel, but another thing you can do, if you imagine this is the sole of the foot, and sort of chafe it until it really warms up, and that's an amazing way of grounding someone's qi and bringing it out of their head. So you can either do that instead of or alongside doing the kidney 1. That's good, so you can do it even lighter, literally sort of. Yeah, that's great. Like pushing up dust. Exactly, exactly. Yeah, that's great. Have any questions come up while you've been doing it? Has it felt okay to do? Yes. Yeah, yeah. I think I would advise you to do it a few times over the next week or two to sort of cement it in your brains. And just always come back to the intention. You know, what's happened to the qi and how are you trying to kind of rectify it? So I would normally stop the stroking at the wrist, but if you want to, you can then just go over each individual finger. So you've moved the qi down, and now you're sort of almost moving it out. So it's not necessary, but it's something that feels right to do sometimes. I would definitely, as I mentioned before, just use this as a template and then just tweak it as you need to. Owen, do you want to lie on your tummy and I'll just show people the back bit? Especially because you haven't had a... Can I... Do you want to come here? Maybe head that end. Thank you. So if you want to, you could turn someone over. I mean, I like people not having to move at all, because it gets them out of that state when they have to move. But if you feel it's right, you can then do the same stroking down the bladder channel. You can also just palpate beforehand and feel, for example, you might feel it's more tense around bladder 18, bladder 19, do a bit more there. Particularly in kids, they very often have tension at the back of the neck and into the shoulders, so you can do a little bit of stroking. particularly kids who are hyperactive, who don't sleep. And then bring the cheese down. And then you can finish by going down the bladder channel on the back of the leg. And then ending with your kidney 1. And then the same on the other side. So that's a little kind of addition that you can do if you want to. Thank you. At least you've had a bit of a treatment there. And if you're working with adults and you use this, particularly with adults who are a bit jittery about needles, do this, and then they just accept the needling, because their chi's already kind of relaxed. Unless anyone has any questions, if you've finished, do feel free to go and get a cup of tea or have a bit more time shopping. It's a pleasure. Pleasure. Good to see you too, Avern.